Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. I am currently away from my computer attending a preview event out of state, so we're actually going to record this ahead of time, skipping the news this episode. Last year, we got the long-awaited third entry in the Bayonetta series, in Bayonetta 3, and now it seems like Nintendo realizes what it has because it is publishing another Bayonetta game just a few months later. However, it's not quite the Bayonetta game anyone really expected. Joining me for his review of Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon, as well as a first segment that I am very excited to do, it's Marcus Stewart. Marcus, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm feeling pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I know you have had an overall very good time playing Bayonetta Origins, so we will get to that in just a little bit. But first, before we jump into that review, I want to take this first segment, since we're skipping news, to chat a little bit about a big anniversary that happens later this month, and that is Star Fox. As of March 26th, Star Fox as a franchise will be 30 years old in the United States, which is just wild to me because I still remember when that game came out and how it was just mind-blowing how good the visuals looked on that. Do you remember the first time you saw the Star Fox franchise?
Man, it probably would have been maybe like an advertisement in like a Toys R Us or something. I'm like really trying to think back, but I never had the original as a kid, but I know I had friends that talked about it, and I know I saw it and had the same reaction of, you know, like, oh, this is I don't even think I was like old enough or aware enough to say like this looks like a computer game, right? It just like this just looks, I guess for lack of a better term, real.
It did back then. I remember like thinking about like how wild it looked, because it was one of the few games that were able to, at the time, have polygonal graphics and like 3D scrolling, and it ran like garbage on the SNES. Don't get me wrong, like it chugged on the SNES, and it had like that look that kind of typified the really early 3D games, but on a system that typically couldn't create 3D visuals. And it was actually, you know, the first game to really use the Super Nintendo Super FX chip. And also, you know, it's just another one of Shigeru Miyamoto's amazing creations. So we'll just throw that out there. It's just like that guy only makes hits. Well, maybe not only, but, you know, he makes hits.
Yeah, he had a phase where he was kind of obsessed with topping himself. You know, he was like James Cameron of like, oh, I could get number one again. You know,
it's wild. It's just the guy's catalog. Shigeru Miyamoto's catalog is just unrivaled, and I don't know if anybody's ever going to rival the work that he has done. I mean,
he's the Walt Disney of video games.
He absolutely is, and he loves Disney, so I bet he would adore that comparison there. But for the first game, Nintendo collaborated with Argonaut Software, which, you know, they ended up doing a lot of the programming and engine development while Nintendo handled the artwork and character design. And they were kind of figuring out like what type of game they wanted to have. The idea originally was to have an on-rails arcade shooter, and Argonaut was like, well, why don't we do it as like a kind of space shooter, and you're all in like spaceships and everything. And Miyamoto really loved that idea, so he looked at inspirations. He liked the X-Wing design from Star Wars. And then there's the famous story about how Miyamoto grew up around, I believe this was the shrine that he grew up around. It was I'm reading this, the Fushimi Inari Taisha Shrine in Kyoto, Japan.
I went there last month when we did the Resident Evil cover story. We took a day trip to Kyoto, Alex Van Aken and I, and we climbed to the top of that thing.
So as you know, then there's a ton of gates that you walk through.
Yes.
And Shigeru Miyamoto took that as inspiration, and that's why in a lot of Star Fox games, there's little gates that you have to like navigate through in order to either unlock secrets or get power-ups or whatever, because he really liked the idea of an aircraft flying through those.
That explains the weird tourist I saw trying to do a barrel roll as I was climbing up.
And, you know, Miyamoto, once he settled on the space theme with the help of Argonaut Software, which, by the way, Dylan Cuthbert was a member of that, who is now the head of Q Games, or it was the founder of Q Games, who they do, what's the game? It's
they one of the Pixel Junk games.
Pixel Junk, the strategy game, yeah.
Tomorrow Children.
Yeah, so they've done a good amount. It's funny because I was actually at GDC, and I completely forgot that Dylan Cuthbert had founded Q Games, and I was seeing one of the Pixel Junk games, and I was like, the guy handed me his card. I didn't even look at it for a second. He was just like, hey, I'm Dylan. I'm like, hey, Dylan, nice to meet you. and he's giving me the demo, and then like I went back to my hotel room and I was looking at my cards that I got, and I saw Dylan Cuthbert. I'm like, what? I had no idea. And I was like really bummed I didn't talk to him about Star Fox, because I grew up obsessed with especially Star Fox 64, which we're going to get into in a little bit here. But that's really cool that you got to go to that. That's actually something that ever since I learned about that, it was something that I always wanted to go to that shrine. And when we were in Japan last October for the Street Fighter 6 cover story, we thought about maybe going to Kyoto, but I was like, let's just spend some time in Osaka, and then we're going to go back to Tokyo for one night. And that I chose to spend the night in Tokyo instead of Kyoto, just because I missed Tokyo,
Yeah, Tokyo's fun.
But he chose animals once he settled on this is Miyamoto. He chose animals once they settled on like a space theme, because he didn't want to be like pretty much every other piece of sci-fi entertainment and like have like humans and robots and aliens fighting. Like he's like, yeah, let's just do animals, like anthropomorphic animals fighting each other, which in retrospect was very smart, because it immediately gave it like a distinctive look, and they played on that with like the puppet aesthetic, where they're the mouths when they talk kind of looks like a puppet instead of like an actual animal.
Yeah, it also fits with Nintendo's sort of like kid-friendly theme. Like that had to have helped make it a easier sell for parents. Like, oh, it's got this cute fox and his bird friend and his rabbit friend.
Yes, it absolutely was more kid appealing, but it wasn't so like cutesy that everybody was like, oh, I'm playing a kid's game. It was like, no, you're still shooting down spacecrafts and you're blowing things up.
People are dying left and right.
Yes, it is just a massacre on both sides. But it's a cute frog that's shooting alongside you and often needing your help. So the first Star Fox game came out on SNES on March 26th, 1993 in the US, and it has an aggregate review score of 88% according to Game Rankings. And if you want to play that one, it is available on both the SNES Classic Mini Console and Nintendo Switch Online catalog for SNES. So there's plenty of ways to play it if you either have the SNES collection on Switch, or you have the SNES Classic micro console or mini console, whatever they ended up calling that.
Yeah, that's how I played it for the first time, because like I said, I didn't grow up ever actually getting to play it, but I bought an SNES Classic and ran through the whole game in like a day like 2 years ago. Man, that game's definitely old.
Yes.
It was a lot of it was training my eyes to distinguish polygons from each other. Like, can I shoot that? Is that an enemy? I think. I don't know.
Does it run better on the SNES mini console or micro console?
Like compared to the just regular SNES?
Yeah, because like the regular SNES, like it was just awful frame rates and it chugged a lot. I mean, back then it was novel, but like nowadays it's very difficult. Like, was it at least smooth? I don't know if they like upgraded the hardware at all for the mini consoles.
Yeah, I never played the original version, so I can't compare. I remember it running fine.
Okay, then it probably does run better, because I think it would probably stick out in your mind if it did not run fine. Or if it did not run if it ran the same as it did on the SNES. So shortly after the release of Star Fox, Miyamoto actually began working on Star Fox 2, which was another SNES title, and he very quickly realized it probably wasn't a good idea, but not quick enough, because he actually almost finished the game. He realized as it was nearing the end of development, they would need the upgraded version of the Super FX chip if he wanted it to run correctly on the SNES. That made it more expensive. And then he looked at like the release calendar, and like the Sega Saturn was out or was coming out, and PlayStation was coming out, and the N64 was right around the corner. And Miyamoto was just like, this game's almost done, but I'm going to cancel Star Fox 2 and kind of like move some of those ideas over to Star Fox 64. And we actually interviewed Miyamoto at one point. I think it was the mid 2010s. And I believe it was Andrew Reiner, our former editor-in-chief, who asked Miyamoto about Star Fox 2. And Miyamoto was basically like, yeah, there are some games that should stay unreleased. And
what an ominous statement. That makes it sound like it was like possessed by Pazuzu or something.
Yes.
It's locked in a chest at the bottom of the ocean. Like, I hope no one ever finds this.
It does sound very, very like, yes, we need to hide this away. We can't have any more deaths at the hand of Star Fox 2. But eventually it did come out. It got a 2017 release on the SNES Classic, and then it's also on the Switch Online's SNES library. So it is available to play, which was a huge shock. I mean, that was a big selling point for that SNES Classic. When you were playing Star Fox 1, did you check out Star Fox 2 as well?
Yep, I beat that too.
Oh, wow. What did you think? I actually have not played it all the way through.
It was more Star Fox, I guess. Basically, it was like I was playing it for the historical aspect of it, right? Like, wow, I can't because even if I'm like not like a huge Star Fox fan, like I know the Legend of Star Fox too. So it was more like I was appreciating that I'm playing a thing that I was convinced I would go my entire life without ever laying hands on.
Mm-hmm.
But just as a game, it's like, yeah, it's more of this. It's I don't. It's probably a little bit better. Yeah, it's worth checking out for sure as a novel, but I don't think you need to make yourself finish it necessarily. Like if you kind of got the point, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad it's available. And it's still wild to me that he didn't just put it out, even just to like, well, it's almost done. Let's just put it out and see what happens. Like that kind of mentality of like, well, we'll get some money for it because the first game did. I assume it did pretty well, like at least like commercially. Like, it's just wild to me even today of the idea of like we have a thing that's finished and then going, nah, all that time and effort, nah, just whatever, scrap it.
Yeah, it is very odd that a game would get so close to release or so close to being finished and just kind of pulling the plug. It's a very odd thing, but I'm glad it finally was available. But it sounds like they actually took a lot of those ideas and carried them into Star Fox 64, which is actually my favorite game in the franchise. So according to Miyamoto, the things that were in Star Fox 2 that he brought forward to Star Fox 64 were all range mode, multiplayer, and the fact that you would fight Star Wolf from time to time were brought forward from Star Fox 2 and put into Star Fox 64. And then Star Fox 64 also added levels that use tank and submarines instead of just the R-Wing. And they also greatly enhanced the graphics and added voice acting. And I don't know if our younger listeners will know this, but this is also the game that I think is largely responsible for why our controllers rumble and shake and vibrate today. Because every copy of Star Fox 64 came with the Rumble Pack, which was the hot ticket item for the Nintendo 64, where you plugged it into the back of your N64 controller to make it rumble whenever like you run into something or when you would get hit by an enemy. Like that was a huge deal back in the day.
Oh yeah, like I was a PlayStation kid. I never had an N64, but a lot of my friends did, so I played theirs a lot. And something about the Rumble Pack, like even just the way it looked and how heavy it was, it just felt like it felt cool to put that thing into the controller, like you were injecting it with just this like power, basically. Like yeah, like now we're playing. I mean, I guess the cliche. Now we're playing with power, but that's how it felt. Of like, man, I almost wish, like, I wish we had something like this for PlayStation. It would take a little while, but
Well, was it not until the PS3 or did the PS2 have a rumble?
The PS2 had rumble because remember the PS3 initially didn't, and everyone flipped out like the six axis. Yeah, then they added it back in, but the PS2 definitely did.
Well, I remember Star Fox 64. One time I played it without the Rumble Pack because it also added a nice weight to the controller when you plugged the Rumble Pack into it. It felt super good in your hands.
Got a nice workout.
You did. And I remember playing it without the Rumble Pack one time, and I was like, this just feels weird. Like, it feels wrong, like, not having the controller vibrating. And that was also the case because it got a re-release in 2011 on 3DS, and, the 3DS couldn't rumble. And it felt very different playing it without the Rumble Pack. It just became such a part of the experience. It would be like going on, like, one of those, like, 4D rides that, like, you have at, like, Disney, where it's like the chairs rumble and like everything, only like instead of the chairs rumbling, you just sat still and like you were watching a movie basically. Yeah. Like that's what it felt like almost. That's like that stark of a difference.
The world's most expensive movie. So it's funny. My fondest memories of playing Star Fox 64 was there was a period where I went to a really bougie church. It was like a really rich church that had like a separate building for like the youth like sermons and stuff. And before Sunday school, they had this recreational room that had like walls of TVs with just every console available at the time hooked up, and it was
What?
basically like a free arcade. So they had PlayStations, N64s. They had the Dreamcast when it came out. That's how I played like some of the earlier Dreamcast games for the first time. And we, like me and my friends or just random kids, we would play a bunch of Mario Kart 64, and we would play a bunch of Star Fox 64 together while waiting to go to church.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And they had rumble packs and all the controllers. Like I told you, this was that offering money was being put into good use.
Yeah, well, good for them, I guess. And good for you because you got to basically treat it as your own personal arcade.
Oh yeah, that's the only reason I wanted to go.
So Star Fox 64 came out on June 30th, 1997 and had an 88 out of 100 on Metacritic, so it matched the game rankings aggregate of the first one. And it, like I said, got a re-release on 3DS in 2011, and it's now a part of the Nintendo Switch N64 catalog. And if you don't have the classic N64 controller for your Switch, I would argue that Star Fox 64 is the game that plays the best on the Wii U Pro, or the Switch Pro controller. If you just want to play it on that, because a lot of the N64 games don't translate well to like a standard controller, but Star Fox actually feels okay. So.
Is the 60, because I've been meaning to play the 3DS, like, remake or port of it. Is that a good way to play it too, controls-wise?
Oh, it's great. Yeah, they did a great job with that one. I loved playing that. I've said that this, like, I've told this story before, but, like, one of my favorite gaming memories of all time, and it shouldn't be a favorite gaming memory, but it was just, like, it harkens back to the 4D rides that I was talking about, where, like, your chair is moving. I was on a plane in extreme turbulence.
Oh, no.
Playing Star Fox 64 on my 3DS, and it was the most immersive thing I've ever done in my life.
That's one word for that.
It totally made up for the fact that the 3DS doesn't have a rumble pack, because like my entire body was rumbling.
Oh, you say it made up for the fact that we almost died.
But yes, that was a very intense game session. I was not just my palms sweating. I was just head to toe sweating at that point.
I had a similar experience coming back from Osaka, but it was I watched Top Gun Maverick, and we had the worst turbulence I ever had. But I was not as excited as you were. It actually made the anxiety worse watching that movie. So I had to not watch the movie until we were out of the danger zone.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Because you were on the highway to the danger zone.
There you go. I'm glad you picked up on that.
The jetway to the danger zone. Are there any other memories you want to talk about with Star Fox 64? Because that seems like the gold standard of this franchise.
Yeah, it kind of stands like that to this day, right? Because after that, it kind of takes a steep drop.
Yeah. So my memory with Star Fox 64 was, I played it relentlessly in single player, and I found all the different ways. I would create my own little like scenarios in Star Fox 64, and also I had a notebook where I would like write ideas out for like how to like make a Star Fox 3 or whatever.
Do you still have that?
I'm sure I do somewhere. I just found a notebook that had all my ideas for like Mario games, and I'm thinking that I want to recreate some of them in Mario Maker.
Okay,
which would be very cool.
Next time if you ever get a chance to interview Miyamoto, you should bring that notebook.
I should pitch all of the. I should bring my game design notebook and be like, what if Mario fought Wario in 3D? I don't know. It seems pretty cool.
I think the technology's ready. We can do this.
We can render this. There's enough polygons in a game today.
I noticed what you were waiting for. Just flips his chair over.
He announces his retirement immediately because I came up with this idea that he could never have come up with. So basically, I'd play the game. I'd make my own little scenarios in my notebook, but I also would play it constantly. It was like in heavy rotation alongside like Mario Kart 64, GoldenEye, and Mario Party in terms of like when I would have friends over for either like hangout sessions or sleepovers or whatever. That Star Fox 64 was maybe the second most played game out of all of them. We would just play that multiplayer just for hours on end. It was so much fun. And it was funny because I feel like each person in our friend group had like their personality reflected in each of the characters, and that was the characters we always picked too. It was very funny.
So who was Slippy?
It was one of my friends.
Were they happy with that?
Yeah, I
with
think so.
themselves, I guess.
I think so.
Okay, because there was, I mean, I nobody likes Slippy, right?
I do.
Not to
I
crap on your
so
friend.
I actually got a frog around that time, and I named him Slippy.
Like as a pet, like you went
Yeah,
to the
yeah, I
pet
had a
store.
pet frog.
Oh, okay. I was like, you didn't just take it from outside and just
No, no,
declare
no.
it yours. So
I
okay.
got a frog from a pet store, and then eventually I did introduce him into the wild. So like we had a fish pond outside in like
Mhm.
our pool area, and I put him in there, and because I was like, well, he's gonna be happier in there, and he lived for like probably 6 more years just like living outside, and like we brought him in the winter, and that was it.
You
It's
could
just
distinguish him from like other frogs.
yeah, he was albino, so like he was like
Huh.
bright white,
Well,
and yeah, he lived out in the fish pond.
that is totally awesome.
Yeah, totally. I like it. I
Yeah.
like it a
I
lot. So
can't take credit. There's a Yu-Gi-Oh card called Totally Awesome, and it's a picture of an albino frog, which is why it
oh, interesting.
struck me. Yeah, it's weird now when I think of it.
So, like you had indicated, after Star Fox 64, the series kind of lost its way. So, 5 years later, in 2002, we got Star Fox Adventures on GameCube, and I think that what's what's indicative of this downturn is this is when companies other than Nintendo started making Star Fox games. So, Star Fox Adventures on GameCube was a third-person action game from Rare, so the studio behind Perfect Dark, GoldenEye, Donkey Kong Country, Banjo Kazooie, they put out this third-person action game, and it was actually a good game. But like, I looked at it and I was like, this is not what I want from a Star Fox game. This is like anything but a Star Fox game.
Yeah, isn't there like the legend is that it was a completely different game about dinosaurs, and then like Miyamoto like stopped by and said more or less said like, what if you put Star Fox in this?
I believe so. I believe that is what I've heard.
Like they basically Super Mario 2'd that game.
Because he is fight. He basically Fox travel. He get his. It's such a tease though, because it starts off with an R-wing sequence, and like you're flying through and you're blasting enemies. I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I wanted, and like amazing graphics at the time because it was GameCube instead of N64. And then like Fox crash lands on this dinosaur planet, and it's just like a third-person action game. And like there's a few R-wing sequences if I'm not mistaken, but like it's like 95% like third-person combat, and I'm like, oh, that's not what I wanted from a Star Fox game. I wanted like a continuation of 64, and yeah, that was a bummer. Did you ever play this?
No, oh wait, actually, I might have played it once at a friend's house. I remember, yeah, I think I touched it once and just kind of like dismissed it for the same reason of like, oh, it's weird that you're on foot.
Yeah, I was not a fan of it personally, despite it, by all accounts, being a pretty good game. We did get another Star Fox game for GameCube 3 years later in Star Fox Assault, which was developed by Namco, another third-party developed Star Fox game. And this one actually had kind of like glimmers of hope because there was a lot of R-Wing sequences. And I kind of liked the idea of Fox being able to get out of the R-Wing and have like third-person shooter areas. But like those areas happen way too often, and I just didn't enjoy it enough to like keep playing those areas and push through the end of this. And I don't know, like it looked really cool at first, and then I just I don't know, it just didn't do it for me.
Yeah, I see some potential in the idea of basically turning Star Fox into something like Blaster Master.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wondered how Assault was. I remember seeing it, and no one ever talks about it. So I've never really been clear on like where fans stand on that game.
I want to say it's one of the lower reviewed Star Fox games, if not the lowest reviewed Star Fox game. I think it
Wow.
maybe got a 70 on Metacritic, which might be the lowest until, the most recent one.
Right.
But 1 year after that, we got Star Fox Command on DS, and that was developed by Q Games, who, that's the studio that was founded by Dylan Cuthbert, who worked heavily on the first two Star Fox games. And, it was fine. But again, it felt like it was way too gimmicky because it relied on touchscreen controls and had these RTS and turn-based strategy elements. And I had kind of a similar situation as you, where I was like, oh, right, a new Star Fox game. And then I like played it for like 10 minutes and I was like, nope, not what I want. It was just like you had to use like the touchscreen to like steer the R-Wing. And it's like, that was my main problem with a lot of DS games was they just all veered so much like, all right, you got to control with the touchscreen. It's like, no, just give me a normal normal controlling game. Like
Yeah.
a lot, some of the Zelda DS games were that way for me, where I didn't, and like Star Fox, Sonic, the BioWare one, the Dark
Oh,
Brotherhood.
yeah, Dark Brotherhood. Yeah.
Um, that one was another one where you had to like control it with the stylus, and it just I didn't want that. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if it did anything else like unique with the DS screen, because at least those Zelda games actually used it like in puzzles and like cool mechanical ways. From what you remember, Star Fox, not so much.
I mean, I don't remember enough of it. I literally played it when it was like the first game that I think my brother, when he got his DS, like got it, and I was like, oh well, Star Fox is awesome. I'm gonna play that, and then nope, did not like it. So
Mm.
I have very very loose memories on it. So the Star Fox series pretty much went dormant at that point. So that game came out in 2006, and we didn't get another Star Fox game until 2016. But in between Star Fox Command and Star Fox Zero, which was the Wii U game that we're going to talk about in a second, Retro Studios, so the studio that was behind Metroid Prime and Donkey Kong Country Returns, they had a pitch from one of their artists. This is a recent video from a month ago from Did You Know Gaming, which is a terrific YouTube channel, and they had a former Retro Studios artist on, and he was talking about his pitch for a game called Star Fox Armada that he brought up after Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze came out. Basically, he was like, "Hey, look, we've rebooted Metroid through Prime. We kind of rebooted Donkey Kong Country through the Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze. What if we rebooted Star Fox and did a new game in Star Fox and like made it this awesome thing?" So he handed over the design document that he created for this, and it was turned down by Retro leadership. And according to the video, it seemed like that was kind of a reason that he ended up leaving. And I talked about this, I think, a month ago, whenever this video first hit, that it was a pretty cool thing.
Hmm.
But just fitting it into this conversation, here's part of the design doc. It says, picking up where Star Fox 64 leaves off, Star Fox Armada will essentially reboot the series as if no games have been made since. After the defeat of Andross, General Pepper realizes that Corneria and the Lilat system at large need to be rebuilt. However, the war with Andross has left the Cornerian government with the lack of resources needed to rebuild the military and civilian sectors. Rather than send its meager military out and leave the Lilat system vulnerable, Pepper hires Star Fox once again. Their mission? Search nearby systems for allies and resources. Along the way, Fox and his crew will discover a threat far greater than Andross ever was. And the way that he pitched it was, this is, it's going to be a continuation of Star Fox 64, just completely wipe the slate clean of all the other stuff that has happened. And we will like basically have it so that like you're mercenaries going around, and you could like do side missions if you wanted, which would pad it out. And based on, you'd get your money. And the goal ultimately is to rebuild Corneria. But like based on the money that you get, you choose how much to send back to Corneria and how much to keep for yourself to upgrade your ship. So it's kind of a balancing act of, are we going to upgrade our ship and make like the next missions easier, or are we going to send it back home to progress through like the main objective? So I really like that idea. And then also like, having side missions that you could go and complete out of order was kind of meant to like pad out the game, because like if you play Star Fox 64 today, it's like you can get through it in like an hour and a half, and they wanted that, so there was more of a substantial gameplay session. And I don't know, this sounds awesome to me, and they wanted to keep like the puppet aesthetic, so that way like the Wii U could make it look really cool.
Yeah.
And it just apparently it just got completely shot down, and Retro Studios was not interested in fielding any pitches at that time. And yeah.
Man, it does sound cool. Especially if, again, it's Retro's pedigree. I'd be all over that announcement.
Yeah, I think that would have been great. Yeah, it's a shame it never happened. So if you're interested in that, go check out that Did You Know Gaming from a month ago. It's called Star Fox Armada, Retro's Wii U game that never was. And then, we come to the most recent Star Fox game, which was Star Fox Zero, and that was a Wii U prequel to the first game, hence the name Star Fox Zero. And it looked super promising, and it was developed by Nintendo, so it was back in house. Miyamoto was producing it, and ultimately it was poorly received because, again, it had just too many gimmicks. Like, did you play this? Because it was like just so over the top with how much it made you look back and forth between like the TV screen and the Wii U screen. It just never worked for me.
Yeah, I didn't play it just because I remember reading the reviews weren't great, and so I just didn't want to spend money on it. Didn't they? Because I remember it was all part of that, like, what was it, Project Giant Robot?
Yeah.
And was it Project Shield? Was the other one? Those were released as like standalone experiences that were tied to this, or what was the
So there was
connection there?
Star Fox Guard.
Right.
Was the game that was based on one of those prototypes that you're talking about. And that was like I think it was a tower defense game that was like, if you bought the physical version of Star Fox Zero, you got a bonus disc of Star Fox Guard, which was starring like Slippy and his uncle.
Oh, see, that's your first mistake.
And it was like a tower defense thing where you're setting up defenses. It was just like a fun little mini game, I guess, but it was not really anything. But that was a companion title to Star Fox Zero. And like, I don't know, Miyamoto actually had a quote when we interviewed him for Mario Odyssey, I think it was back in 2017 at E3. And Ben Reeves was leading the interview, but I was in the room for it. And he asked him, what's the most underrated game, the most underrated Nintendo game? And he said Star Fox Zero. And so Miyamoto is still all in on this game. I mean, at least as of the early parts of the Switch lifecycle. So for that reason, I keep predicting that Star Fox Zero is going to come to Switch at some point. And I think it would be a great game if they just stripped away like the motion controls and the second screen stuff. If they just made it so you could control with a standard controller, it would be awesome. And I've talked about this way too many times, so I'm just going to stop myself from rambling on about the same thing.
I was going to bring up, and I don't know if you have this listed among your like official Star Fox games, but there's already a really good Star Fox game on Switch. It's called Starlink Battle for Atlas.
Yes.
Where you can just play as Star Fox, which is what I bought the Switch version specifically because it has Star Fox. I don't care about the human characters, and that game doesn't give you a reason to because they're just like vanilla as can be. But you can play that entire campaign as Star Fox in the Switch version, who's just incorporated into the story. He's just like part of that universe. And it's because I think that game's underrated. It's actually pretty fun.
It was Ubisoft, right?
Yeah. It was like a weird Ubisoft sort of like, we have this one idea and then they never revisited it. It had those toys, like the collectible ship parts.
It was a Toys to Life game.
Yeah, pretty much. One of the last ones, probably, honestly. And yeah, I remember I never finished it, but I put a lot of time into it. And I remember thinking at the time, like, this might be the best Star Fox game since 64. Because I almost forgot that it technically wasn't Star Fox. I only saw him, you know? Because if you put that in front of someone and just say, like, yeah, there's a new Star Fox, you believe it. Because, again, they just fold him into the story. But I think if you're itching for something like Star Fox that has actual Fox McCloud in it, it's worth hunting down a copy of that game.
Yeah, I mean, I played a little bit of it, and it was pretty good. I don't know. I think that there was a lot of story that like I just didn't care about.
Oh no, the plot is you're there to blow up ships, and there's a little bit of like light No Man's Sky, sort of like scanning stuff, planet hopping. But again, it's pretty solid. I think it's pretty all right.
I also worried about, did you get the actual physical R-Wing that you could?
Yep,
with that?
That's also why I bought it. It's on display literally on a shelf next to me.
I wish that I had that because that's the only thing that I wanted from that entire thing. But it like, did it require any of that in order to like activate like different things in Fox? Like, you didn't need to like do that in order to get the R-Wing. I'm a little blurry about that game because it was several years ago at this point.
No, like you can play like because the R-Wing is attached to the like the Switch. I forget the peripheral where you kind of plug the Switch Joy-Cons to form like the puppy dog controller.
Yeah,
it was like that basically as the base. and you could play the game, and then you attach, because it comes with the R-Wing and like attachable like missiles, and you would put it on the R-Wing to toggle it in the game. But you totally don't have to do any of that, and I didn't. Like, you do it at first for the novelty, and you're like, okay, I'm going to use a regular controller and play it like a regular video game. But so no, you don't have to do it. But it, again, I got it because it's actually a pretty nice model of the R-Wing.
Yeah, I mean, it always looked super good, and I'm glad that that exists because it really does feel like Nintendo has just moved on from Star Fox. I think Star Fox Zero was like them saying, like, I wonder if we could make a good Star Fox game, and they did, but then they just buried it in like all the Wii U gimmicks that have turned everybody else off from like all the earlier Star Fox attempts at like carrying on from Star Fox 64, like the DS gimmicks and the other stuff like the Star Fox Assault, where it's like you're getting out of the R-Wing every 5 seconds. Like it felt like there was a good game buried deep beneath all the other garbage that was on top of it.
Yeah,
so, like,
no, go, Brian.
I was just gonna ask you, like, why can't Nintendo get it right?
I don't know. I think maybe it is a little bit of a focus on, it has to be something more than just being a really competent space shooter, like the first, I guess, 3 games were. I'm lumping in Star Fox 2 in there too, but yeah, maybe that, that's sometimes Nintendo's biggest strength and their greatest weakness, right? Of like, they have some wacky idea that no one thinks of, and it's either going to be something that you didn't know you wanted, or it's going to be something you didn't ask for that you wish was gone.
Yeah.
And in Star Fox's case, it seems like it's mostly been the latter of like, it'd be cool if I just flew around and shot things. You don't have to do all this other stuff that incorporates the touchpad or the Wii U screen or anything. I just kind of just want to do Star Fox stuff. Not that I don't want to discourage them from trying things, new. Nintendo's creativity is unparalleled often, but I think because there've been so many misses, if they were to announce a Star Fox project, I would be more like, can you just give me, don't just, less is more.
Like, yeah, exactly. Star Fox seems like one of those franchises that simplicity is one of its greatest strengths.
Yeah.
And, go crazy with like the boss designs and the levels and everything, but like the core gameplay should be tight. It should feel great. And it shouldn't be overly convoluted, and it shouldn't have all these gimmicks and everything. Just give us something simple. Give us something that feels like a continuation of what Star Fox and Star Fox 64 gave us. And, I personally would love to see the franchise go from here, the direction that Retro Studios pitched that, unfortunately the artist is no longer there, but it seems like it would be a really great game if they could figure out some way to have it be just a continuation of Star Fox 64's story.
Yeah, in a weird way, it feels like the ambitious sequel to that game is already out there, and it's called No Man's Sky.
Yeah. Yeah, but like, I think that, just give us a simple Star Fox game, and that's the way forward for the franchise. If Nintendo is just so good at coming up with creative ideas, like, it hits it out of the park most of the time with its ideas. Like, look at anytime it innovates within the Legend of Zelda franchise, or anytime it innovates within the Mario franchise, it's almost always a home run.
Yeah.
And Star Fox, it just can't figure out the wild, over the top innovation that it wants to do, and like make it feel right, or make it play right, or make it something that's not feeling too complicated for what it is. Let's just do a back to basics approach with the Star Fox, make it look really good, make it play really good, and then just give us awesome stages and awesome sequences. It doesn't have to be something too complex. And that's what I want with the franchise going forward.
Yeah. Where do you think it sits on like the totem pole of priority? Because I feel like for decades, like Metroid had the rap of being like, oh, they don't care about Metroid because it doesn't sell the way that their other mainline stuff is. Plus, it's not one of Miyamoto's babies, so it's sort of like the redheaded stepchild of the like Nintendo first party roster, even though it's also iconic at the same time. So that was kind of always the excuse for like, oh, that's why you don't get a lot of Metroid games anymore. But I'd argue we get more Metroid games than we do Star Fox.
Well, now
like,
we do,
for sure. Yeah, so it's like, has Star Fox like been supplanted, or like was Star Fox always down there, but we just didn't think of it because it's a Miyamoto joint? Because it feels like at this point, like, I mean, I'd say it's been the case for a long time, but like in modern times, Metroid is like leaps and bounds ahead of Star Fox right now. So like, what do you think the likelihood is? Like, that is there even going to be one on Switch? Like, will the Switch come and go without any Star Fox whatsoever?
If we don't get it this E3 timeframe, I think we are going to go throughout the entire Switch life cycle without getting a new Star Fox. That's my prediction, and I mean, it's probably right above F-Zero in terms of priority, if I'm being honest. And like, it is a Miyamoto creation, so it does always have a chance because he loves like trying another crack at it. But none of the recent ones, like the last well-received Star Fox game was 1997. So It's like they've tried, other companies have tried, and nobody can get it right. So it's like, why? I think that like the difference between Star Fox and Metroid is almost every Metroid game is great. Whereas like, Other M being kind of like the big exception there. And even that is like fine. It just has some problems that other Metroid games don't. Star Fox has just had so many missteps that like I wonder if they're like, all right, we gave it 10 years. We couldn't come up with a really good idea for this franchise. Let's shelve it and maybe we'll dust it off if we come up with another good idea. But I don't think it needs a good idea. I've said it 20 times now in this segment. Just take it back to basics. That's what Nintendo needs to do with the Star Fox franchise.
I would even just take a remake, like the way they did a remake of Link's Awakening.
Yeah.
Like just do something like that for Star Fox 1 or 64 and just sort of expand it, maybe give it a cool art style.
What if they did like Star Fox Anthology? It's Star Fox 1, Star Fox 2, Star Fox 64, and Star Fox Zero, all in the Star Fox Zero visuals and all with like the Star Fox 64 controls.
Sure, why not?
That would be the greatest announcement I think they could do for Star Fox.
It'd be a good litmus test for, public interest.
I mean, that's basically what Capcom did with like the Mega Man franchise, right? They put out the Legacy collections and they were like, oh, people like these. Let's make Mega Man 11.
Yeah, they tend to do that a lot with their stuff.
Yeah, they really do. But anything else about Star Fox before we move on to our second segment here, Marcus?
I hope we get a new one.
Me too.
I'm sure we will one day. I don't think the series is like dead forever. But I hope we get one sooner than later. And at least the nice thing about Nintendo is that you never know what they're doing. They're so good at like surprise announcing something that you never knew was happening. And they're like, oh yeah, we've been working on this for a while and it comes out in 3 months. Surprise.
Yeah.
So Star Fox could be announced tomorrow for all we know.
That would be nice. Although it wouldn't be nice because we're recording this a week ahead of time. So
yeah, we're going to look like idiots.
We are really going to look like idiots if at some point in the next week they announce a Star Fox game. I don't think that's going to happen, but actually I'd be happy if we looked like idiots in that sense anyway. We look like idiots every other day of our lives.
They straight up do your idea with the anthology. That'd be amazing.
God, and yeah, I need like a photographic evidence of me like holding up today's newspaper, being like, see, it was March 10th when I came up with this idea. But
Miyamoto's a fan, I see.
Yes, Miyamoto is a fan of all things Nintendo. So we're going to take our only break of this episode, and when we get back, we are going to get Marcus's review of Bayonetta Origins, Cereza, and the Lost Demon. We will be right back. Just last year, we got Bayonetta 3 on Switch, which was a successful continuation of the classic over-the-top action the Bayonetta franchise has become known for. Now we return to the world of Bayonetta for a new prequel adventure, but it's pretty much far from the standard Bayonetta formula that we've come to expect. In this second and final segment of this episode, we are talking all about Bayonetta Origins, Cereza, and the Lost Demon. Marcus, what was your first reaction when you saw this announcement?
It was probably different than maybe a lot of hardcore fans, because I am a huge Bayonetta fan. It's one of my favorite stylish action. I'm a huge stylish action guy. And so it's up there as one of my favorite series. And I think the general reaction from a lot of hardcore fans was sort of disappointment or just confusion. And when I saw it, I was definitely kind of taken aback, but more in a good way. I was like, oh, this looks cool. And that's because I'm always a fan when an established IP is sort of taken in a new direction, like a new genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm a big fan of those. I'm a big Tomb Raider fan, and I like those Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light games.
Really?
Yeah, I think those games are fun. And I was also really big on Lara Croft Go, the mobile puzzle thing.
So you were all about Star Fox Guard.
I could not find the pre-order to get the disc or whatever. That's why I didn't play it. I was like, want to throw this big shield around. But yeah, I like to see, because it's like, we've gotten 3 games of Bayonetta as Bayonetta. It's like, okay, I know what that is, but if you can take that idea and spin into something new, that always interests me. So I was actually pretty on board with this at the start.
So I'm not that big of a Bayonetta fan. I've played parts of the first one. I completely skipped the second one, and I have not yet fired up the third one.
You should play that second one. It's excellent. It's probably the best one.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think 2 is fantastic.
So when I saw this, I was like, oh, this is a game I can probably skip. I just was like thinking like, this is, just, it's an origin story of Bayonetta before she was Bayonetta, before she was this, is it Umbral Witch?
Yeah, Umbra Witch, yes.
Umbra Witch.
Still in training in this game.
And it's like a storybook aesthetic, and she's known as Cereza at this point, her original name before she became known as Bayonetta. And she's kind of going around and solving environmental puzzles, and it looks like there's some combat. So can you give me like any additional details and like an overview of what this game actually is?
Yeah, you've kind of mostly covered it. So yeah, you're playing as little Cereza. She's trying to rescue her mom. For fans of the Bayonetta lore, her mom's been held captive for most of her childhood, and she's trying to become stronger. Like, that's her motivation. Like, I just want to be a full-fledged witch so I can rescue her and, live our lives. And you get to see her being mentored by this older witch, Morgana, in the woods. This is after she's sort of like left the Umbra Witch Order because they refuse to train her because she's like an outcast. There's a whole can of worms there with the Bayonetta lore I won't get into. but yeah, so she has this vision that promises her power if she goes into this forbidden forest. And so, she defies her mentor's wishes, goes in there. But at this point, she's unable to summon a demon. And when she does, she can only summon one, which is Cheshire. If you played Bayonetta 3, Viola used Cheshire as her one demon, so there's some parallel there, as well as this game sort of establishes a bit of a narrative connection for the significance of Cheshire. But what's the kicker is that she summons Cheshire, but she doesn't know how to return him to Inferno, which is basically hell. Mm-hmm. And also Cheshire is angry because Cheshire's like, since Bayonetta's not a trained witch, she basically can't command the respect of this thing. It's a very like Ash Ketchum Charizard situation in like the Indigo League sort of vibe a bit, where he's just like not having anything that she's offering because he just doesn't respect her. And then she's really insecure. And one thing I like about this game is getting to see this different version of Bayonetta, because in the other game, she's presented as super confident, super elegant, super graceful witch, like can do anything. You rarely ever see her like break a sweat or let things get to her. And in this game, she is just this like insecure, sometimes outright cowardly child. And it's kind of it kind of makes you appreciate Big Bayonetta, kind of seeing her journey to get to what she is, or eventually becomes. But yeah, the whole adventure is them basically being stuck together to try to find some power in this forest, and then also try to find a way to send Cheshire back home. And so the game is a top-down, somewhat isometric, somewhat Metroidvania-like adventure game where you're exploring this giant forest that's divided into these very large labyrinthine sort of like hub areas. Yeah, there's barriers that require certain abilities that you have to, revisit to open. There's a bunch of collectibles to find. And you can summon Cheshire at will, and you'll be doing it because there's a bunch of environmental puzzles to solve. And the way the game works is that you're controlling Cheshire with one stick, the left analog stick, and you're controlling Cheshire with the right stick. So it's very Brothers of the Tale of Two Sons, if anyone's played that game. But what's nice is because, even though it takes understandably a little while to get used to that, once your brain gets wrapped around it, it's easy. But you also don't have to do it all the time, because you can summon and recall Cheshire at will. What's also cute is that when you summon or recall Cheshire, he sits in your doll, and you can hold the right stick out, and Cereza will just run and sort of project the like a ghost. I'm trying to think of how to describe it. You're basically sort of like stretching the doll out with like spirit powers, and you basically use it to just interact with things from a distance, and then eventually you can get upgrade where if you do that, you run faster. It's maybe you have to see it, but it's very cute because it kind
I'm
of
I'm
looks like
kind of
she.
confused by your description, but yes, I'm sure it's very cute.
Yeah, imagine like when you have a doll and you're kind of holding it out to sort of like almost like a shield to protect you from things. It's kind of like that, but magic.
Okay.
Let's yeah.
I'm sure it's absolutely adorable.
And that's kind of the story of this game. Is everything in this game is the cutest thing you've ever seen in your life. It
You,
is. What were we gonna say?
you said in your review that it permanently etched a smile on your face.
Yes, everything from the presentation to the voice acting to the storytelling. It is like a warm hug from like your favorite childhood fairy tales or storybooks, because like you mentioned before, everything's presented that way. There's a narrator, a very kind of like lovely elderly British woman that narrates the entire adventure and even provides Cheshire's voice, but she does it in the way that when you're reading a story to like a kid, and let's say there's a monster character, and so you give it like a deeper voice version of your voice to sort of like let them know that you're the monster. So whenever Cheshire speaks, it's her going like, ha ha, I'll get you, little girl. And it's super, it's super cute.
So does she do the Bayonetta voice as well, or did they get like, was it Jennifer Hale? Was that who ended up doing Bayonetta for Bayonetta 3?
Yeah, she did. No, this is I assume a younger actress, because Bayonetta does have her own voice, but it's like a young girl voice. It's not Jennifer Hale, but I didn't realize this till I saw the credits. Jennifer Hale voices Morgana, who is Bayonetta's mentor in this game.
Oh, interesting.
So like they got some extra work out of her, I guess.
I mean, I know she's a chameleon. Like she's absolutely like amazing in her voice acting.
Yeah, she's good at hiding too.
I'm assuming they did not get the original Bayonetta actress after the controversy that unfolded. Go back and find a previous episode of All Things Nintendo if you need to know that.
Yeah, she might have voiced a bush that you have to set on fire at a certain point. It was an interesting choice.
I have a feeling that Platinum will not be hiring her again.
Yeah, probably not. But yeah, and what I like about this game too is that it's such a departure from the other Bayonetta stories, where I probably care more about the lore of Bayonetta more than I do, say, Devil May Cry, where I'm kind of in it more for the characters than the reason that they're fighting, if that makes sense. And Bayonetta, like, even then, their stories are, I don't even want to say they're necessarily good, but for what they need to accomplish, they're fine. I think Bayonetta 3, I know some people, or not even some people, quite a significant group of the Bayonetta fandom was not happy with the way the game ends. I was largely indifferent to it, but it does kind of go off the rails. So this game being the opposite of that, where it is a very coherent, very endearing, like there's none of the sort of tongue-in-cheek. I mean, obviously it doesn't have any of the sort of like tongue-in-cheek sexual innuendo stuff that the main games are known for. It's just the, like I said this in my review, it's the best story they've ever done, because not only is it just it makes sense, but it's actually very heartwarming in a way. Like, this game has some writing chops that I didn't think the Bayonetta series was capable of having, especially in terms of the relationship between Cheshire and Bayonetta. They're doing the sort of reluctant partners thing where they don't get along at first, but they are stuck together. But the way they develop that over time is more interesting than you would expect, where you kind of find yourself rooting for them as individuals and as a pairing. And sort of there's some twist along the way, some surprising twists too, that I thought were well earned. And it's just this story of seeing Cereza again as this insecure witch who just wants to get stronger because she wants to save her mom. Like, that's a very relatable, or not even relatable, but it's something it's easy to root for. Like, she loves her mom. She's this outcast. She's doesn't have really any friends besides John. And she just wants to save one of the few people that actually cares about her. And her journey to trying to get stronger as she's trying to like you see moments where she wants to run away and she's telling herself like, no, I can't run. Or like, especially when, and you feel bad for her when Cheshire also berates her for running and stuff like that. And but even seeing him kind of come around on her is it's just nice. It's just such a pleasant game. And I said this in my review that it's got the whimsy and heart of a Winnie the Pooh story.
Mm-hmm.
And also just like it's got a very Disney vibe to it. Sort of the arc and the characters in like a good way.
And like, as somebody who does care about the story of Bayonetta, do you get like some good insight into Cereza as she grows as a character, or is this kind of like just like a self-contained story?
There's some stuff, especially for like childhoods, because you get to see. Trying to think of what I can say, because there are some things that I flat out can't say for embargo reasons. But there is some insight and just sort of like her relationships with certain characters at that time, like Jean, for example, and also just because the only time we've ever seen young Bayonetta was in the first game, but that was an even younger version of her. Like the little girl in the first game, she was probably like 6, maybe. Whereas this in Cereza and Lost Demon, she's around like 10, 11. So much older and more capable. So, which is a period of her life that has not really been covered. So yeah, it does fill in the gap, and like it is canon. Like it is not like a standalone thing. But you also don't need to be a fan of the series to play this, which is nice. Like between it being a completely different genre for people that either don't enjoy stylus action or just aren't good at it, maybe, and they just want like a more relaxed adventure game, and you don't want to worry about the narrative baggage of 3 Bayonetta games. This being a prequel and it makes it the perfect jumping on point and also the perfect jumping off point. Like, I don't think you need to feel like you need to go play the other games after playing this, unless you just really take to it, and great. But you can kind of play this and be like, yeah, I'm good, and then never play another Bayonetta game.
Yeah, that was kind of like one of my questions I had for you is how would you recommend this to people? Because like we see people who love the Bayonetta franchise for its just over the top action and just absurd scenarios that play out. And they're like, this doesn't look like it's for me. And then it seems like entirely plausible that people who have had zero experience with the Bayonetta franchise, have zero interest in the Bayonetta franchise, could see this and think that it's right up their alley.
Yeah, and I've seen some people say that they're just not interested in it because it's not action. And I get that. For me, I mean, I guess it helps that we just got a mainline Bayonetta less than 6 months ago. So it's like, I'm not like hungry for a new one. So it makes it easier to, I guess, accept a side project like this. And I'm also like, I enjoy these kind of games anyway. So when you code it in a license that I also like, it's like, oh great, I already like these kind of games, and it's a Bayonetta game too. I'll play that. But it's just, well, at least in terms of the action angle, I will say there's more combat in this game than people might think that there is. And it's also a lot more involved and more fun. It's definitely simplified. Like, you're not going to be doing a gazillion hit combos and getting grades at the end and doing any like super flashy, elaborate special attacks. But the combat in this game, the way it works is that Cheshire's the only one that can attack. Cereza can only bind enemies in place with magic vines. And you're controlling both simultaneously. And Cheshire's only attacks, they're only one button. You just hit the right trigger. So it's not so much about combining different attacks. It's about button timing. So, like attack, pause, and then attack again. You'll do like a different move. Both characters have full skill trees. And, the simple sort of ebb and flow of like, oh, I'm going to tie this guy down and then wail on them with Cheshire. That grows over time in ways that actually make it pretty engaging. Cereza can eventually tie multiple enemies down, and then her vines can do stuff like drain magic from them to refill her meter, or like inflict slow status effect on them. Whereas Cheshire gains these elemental abilities throughout the game, where he can straight up just transform into like a grass form or a water form, and you can do that on the fly. And they each have their own attacks, where the water form can spray. Like, he can shoot basically like a hydro pump from his mouth, and you can get enemies from a distance, and you can trap them inside of bubbles. Or the grass form, he can spit a vine out that can yank down airborne enemies or disorient other ground enemies. And each of those forms have like different combo tiers that you can unlock, and also you can swap them on the fly, so you can swap forms mid combo and just kind of get them all in if you're really good. And also just the act of attacking feels good. Like those swiping with those claws, like it's got a nice weight to it, and it shouldn't be surprising because this is Platinum that made this. It's not like they just shipped this off to another studio.
Yeah,
like,
this wasn't outsourced.
Yeah, this is them. So their combat chops are very evident here because this just feels like a fun game to play just from a combat standpoint. It's just a completely different style, but also it still has that stylish action trapping. And I think it's fun. They throw like a bunch of different, like there's big arena battles that you often do, and they'll throw like a bunch of different enemies. The enemy variety is surprisingly big. They have different environmental vulnerabilities. So that's where the fun strategy comes in of like, okay, I'm going to switch to my grass form. I'm going to take the shield away from this guy with my vine. And then I'm going to switch to my water form because this guy has a fire shield that I need to break through, and the water form's the only one that can get through it. And so like monitoring the battlefield, and you're also, remember, you're steering a separate character in Cereza who can't defend her. I mean, she can tie enemy down, but other than that, she can kind of just run around and dodge. And there's even times where you kind of have to help each other. Like there's one enemy that'll throw like bear traps on the ground, and if Cheshire gets caught, then you have to go over with Cereza to open it up. You can recall Cheshire anytime to refill your magic because everything you do is dictated on the magic meter. So if you run out, you have to call him back, give him a hug, which is literally what she's doing. She's like hugging him to give him more magic, and then you can throw him back out there. It's like a Pokemon thing of like Pokeball, come back, heal up, throwing you back out there to fight. But you can even upgrade that in some fun ways. Like I got an ability where every time you recall, Cheshire damages everything like in the line back to Cereza. So you can set that up strategically where I'm like, I'm going to run to the other side of these guys, call him back so that he just like barrels through everyone on the way back to me. It's fun. Like, and there's quite a bit of combat. There's a few big boss battles that remind me the most of regular Bayonetta in terms of just their scale and involvement. They don't get as tough as like the average Bayonetta boss does, but they have enough bite to where you do need to be on your game. I'd say by and large the game is definitely easier. I almost never used health potions. You can concoct potions the way you do in a normal Bayonetta game where you collect ingredients and you go in a menu and you stir up a cauldron and all that stuff. But I was like sitting on a stockpile of them because I just never needed to use them. But I didn't.
You're some sort of super gamer. That's what you're saying.
Well, that's. I didn't want to say it, but but I don't think that's a knock necessarily either, because I think this game benefits most from that more laid back vibe. And again, I think the combat is tough enough to keep you interested without becoming boring, but it doesn't make you go like, oh, I'm mad, Yeah. And then outside of combat, you're doing a ton of exploration. Like I mentioned before, this game is more or less a Metroid game. I had a great time exploring because that world is absolutely gorgeous. Like, I really can't praise the art direction enough. This is an example of, getting around the Switch hardware. If you can't achieve fidelity, then do an interesting art direction. And this game does that. I think it's the best looking game this year next to Hi-Fi Rush.
Wow.
It's just nice to look at, and it reminds me of Okami, which obviously has lineage with Platinum, and also the soundtrack is up there with Hi-Fi Rush as my favorite of the year. It's got a lot. I told this to Kyle, but the game has a lot of Zelda inspiration in its soundtrack because you'll find these chests and they do the full like piano jingle. Hey, you found a thing, and you get this pleasant little piano melody, and you're like, oh yeah, I did find a heart piece. Also, there's like straight up heart pieces in this game.
Oh wow!
They're not hearts, but it's the same thing.
You are doing a good job of selling me on this because you're saying a lot of magic words for me.
That's the key word for this game. It feels magical. Like the world has all these really fun environmental puzzles where you're solving them together. Uh, taking advantage of both characters' abilities. There's these other levels that are they're basically like they take place in an alternate dimension, and that's kind of where the bulk of the like puzzle solving takes place because you'll hit an area and you're like, okay, you have to pass into this other realm and basically do this a very elaborate tag team puzzle to get to the other side of it. Those only like appear once, and they were all pretty fun. And despite having to control two characters, none of them ever really feel tedious or overly complicated, but they're enough to make you think. So it's like that. To me, it strikes that level of like fun challenge of like, okay, I don't immediately see the solution, but I'm not like staring at this for 30 minutes being like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, like it sounds like they balance the puzzles very well along with the combat. Like that seems like it's kind of the recurring theme here in terms of like what you're saying, where you're like, yeah, the action's really fun and it's engaging, but I wasn't like chugging down potions left and right. And the puzzles, they were challenging and they made me think, but I wasn't ever stuck on one for any long period of time. It just sounds like Platinum really did a great job balancing what they brought to the table with this game.
Yeah, it's wild because again, it's so different from regular Bayonetta that for them, I guess like a first attempt at this kind of game, for them to have knocked it out of the park as well as they did, I like as long as I kept playing, like I said, I couldn't stop smiling, and the smile only kept growing as the mechanics got more interesting and they kept introducing more and more. And then you realize real quick that this is not like a 3-hour kiddie side project. Like this is it took me 15 hours to beat the game.
Yeah, I just assumed it was going to be a shorter game, honestly, when it was announced. And I was like, oh, this is probably going to be like a $30 title. No, it's a full $60 MSRP.
Yeah, it's the same length as a regular Bayonetta game, like 15, 16 hours, and there's a ton to find. Oh, I forgot to mention one of my favorite things. I don't know if you're an Ape Escape fan, Brian.
Not so much.
Okay, well, one of my favorite things of Ape Escape is when like all the apes have those little descriptions when you catch them about like, oh, this one likes chocolate or something. It's like a dumb, silly little touch, but there's an equivalent of that where you're finding these lost souls that are basically dead kids. Not even basically, they literally are just dead. Like there's like, oh, they're kids that wandered in the forest and did not make it out.
Oh no.
But they have their own little like society, and you're trying to find them all, and you lead them back to this like playground where they all hang out, and the playground becomes like, it starts out as like this crappy, sad playground, but the more you send back, it becomes like brighter, and there's more things that they can interact with. You see them all hanging out, having a good time. But like, there's dozens of them, and they each have their own like cute little bio that reminded me of Ape Escape. Like, oh, this, and it's weird because it's like charming but kind of dark because all their names, or at least most of the ones I read, are kind of tied to how they die.
Oh no!
Or like this kid has like you see a ghost with like a big nail in his head, and his name's like Naily, and they're like, yeah, he.
I almost said Naily as a joke.
No, a lot of the names are that caliber.
Oh my god!
And then you read his bio, and like, oh yeah, he loved working on things. He was a wood shop kid, and then went to the forest and got a nail in his head, and that's how he died. But he's got a funny personality, and everyone likes him. And you're like, this is twisted, but also very charming. I like going out of my way to find all those guys. Yeah, and it's also a great game to play handheld because of that chill vibe. Like, it looks great on the small screen, like the art direction, but just chilling out, exploring this forest. I'm just gonna collect some stuff. I'm not gonna go for the main mission right now. I'm just gonna go clean up some stuff in this zone. It's such a pleasant surprise. I know I keep comparing it to Hi-Fi Rush, but there's so many parallels between the art direction and the music in terms of the quality, but also just the surprise factor. I mean, Hi-Fi Rush was a literal surprise because we didn't know that game existed till it came out.
Yeah.
And then this is like a surprise in the sense that I don't think anyone expected this game to be much more than like a throwaway sort of like cash grab thing. And it's one of my favorite games of the year so far. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, it definitely is going to be one that I check out now that it's out as of this episode coming out. Like, I'm super excited to play it now. Like, I was totally like, oh, I can ignore that. I'm not a big Bayonetta fan. This doesn't look like it's really up my alley, but the way you're describing it has completely sold me on it. And I appreciate you kind of bringing such passion to this conversation because, like, yeah, even reading your review, which is up on GameInformer.com right now, I was like, oh, this sounds good. but like hearing you talk about it and being able to ask you a few questions here has really, really made me interested in this. So is there anything else that we need to know about Bayonetta Origins, Cereza, and the Lost Demon?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I'll just emphasize, like, hey, if you were on the fence and you're a Bayonetta fan, don't sleep on it. Don't underestimate it. There's a lot more than you think. And yeah, you can check out my review on the site. I gave it an 8.75.
All right. Well, Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon is available today on Switch. And if you are still on the fence, there is a demo available now. So, Marcus, thank you so much for joining me for this episode.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
And thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at allthingsnintendo@GameInformer.com or join the Game Informer Community Discord, which is a perk for subscribing to our Twitch channel, even just for 1 month. Marcus, tell everyone where they can find you online.
You can check me out on Twitter at Marcus Stewart 7, which is the number 7.
That is our show for this week. Thank you again for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.